Hello. It's almost surreal to think about now, but I can pinpoint the exact moment my world began to unravel. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, and I was at the park with our 6-year-old daughter, Lily. She'd been begging me all week to take her to the new playground that had just opened in town, and since my wife, Emily, said she had a work project to catch up on, it was just the two of us that day. I remember it vividly. The smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of kids laughing, and Lily's delighted shrieks as she ran around the playground, her little face flushed with excitement. I was sitting on a bench nearby, sipping a lukewarm coffee and enjoying the rare moments of peace. Emily had been working a lot lately, taking on more projects than usual, and I felt a bit disconnected from her. But I shrugged it off, attributing it to the natural ebb and flow of any long-term relationship. I was just scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly when I noticed Lily waving at me from the top of the slide, her face beaming. I smiled and waved back, watching as she slid down and ran off to join some other kids playing tag. That's when my gaze shifted beyond the playground, over to a secluded area of the park, partially hidden by a cluster of trees. There, on a path lined with tall hedges, I saw two figures, one of them a man, the other a woman. They were standing close together, their heads bent in conversation. At first, I didn't think much of it. Couples came to this park all the time. But then something caught my eye. The woman's posture, the way she tilted her head, and the soft laugh that floated on the breeze, felt familiar. My heart started to pound as I squinted, trying to get a clearer view. She had her back to me, but there was something about the way she stood, the outline of her figure, that made my stomach twist in an uncomfortable way. And then she turned slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of her face. It was Emily, my wife. I froze, the cup of coffee slipping from my hand and spilling onto the ground. Forgotten. I blinked, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, it was definitely her. She was wearing the same blouse I'd seen her put on that morning. The same blouse she said she'd wear while working at home. And she wasn't alone. The man standing next to her was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a confident, easy stance. I didn't recognize him, but the way he looked at her, the way his hand rested lightly on her arm, it was intimate. Too intimate. I watched, stunned, as he leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear as he murmured something that made her laugh softly. Then, before I could even process what was happening, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't just a peck on the cheek or a friendly gesture. It was a real kiss, slow, lingering, full of a kind of passion I hadn't seen from her in years. And she kissed him back. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. Everything around me seemed to blur, the world narrowing to that one excruciating moment. My wife, kissing another man, in the middle of a public park where anyone, including our daughter, could see them. I had no idea how long I stood there, staring at them, my heart hammering in my chest. Anger, shock, disbelief. They all hit me at once, overwhelming my senses. Part of me wanted to march over there, to confront them, to demand an explanation. But another part of me felt paralyzed, as if moving would make it all real. Then, as if sensing my presence, Emily pulled away from him, glancing around cautiously. I quickly ducked behind a tree, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My heart was racing so hard I thought it might explode. What the hell was I supposed to do? What was I supposed to say? I stayed hidden, watching as they exchanged a few more words. She looked nervous now, casting furtive glances around as if afraid someone might see them. Good, I thought bitterly. You should be scared. You should be terrified. Because you just destroyed everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they parted ways. The man turned and walked off down the path, his hands casually in his pockets. Emily lingered a moment longer, her expression troubled. Then she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and started walking back toward the main area of the park. Toward me. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, my mind racing. I couldn't let her see me. Not now. Not like this. I needed time to think, to process what I just witnessed. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned and hurried back to the playground, my thoughts in a chaotic whirl. When I reached Lily, she was playing with some other kids, completely oblivious to the storm that had just shattered her father's world. I plastered on a smile, trying to hide the turmoil inside me. "Hey, sweetie," I called, my voice strained. "Are you ready to go?" She pouted, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Already? But I want to play a little longer, Daddy." I glanced over my shoulder, my nerves fraying. Emily was getting closer. I could see her weaving through the park, her eyes scanning the crowd. She had that same look she always got when she was stressed or upset. But I couldn't find it in myself to care. Not after what I'd seen. "I know, Lily, but it's getting late," I said quickly, my tone sharper than I intended. "Come on, let's go." She hesitated, sensing something was wrong, but then nodded slowly. I grabbed her hand and started walking briskly toward the parking lot, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What the hell was going on? Who was that guy? How long had this been happening? And why? As we neared the car, I heard Emily's voice calling out behind me. "Matt! Matt, wait!" I stiffened, my grip tightening on Lily's hand. My instincts screamed at me to keep walking, to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't. Not with our daughter right there. So I stopped, forcing myself to turn around. She was standing a few feet away, her face flushed, her breathing a little uneven. She looked afraid. I could see the questions in her eyes, the way she was trying to read my expression. Did she know I'd seen her? Did she have any idea what I was feeling right now? "Hey," she said softly, forcing a smile. "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you were taking Lily to the other park." I stared at her, my heart pounding. The casualness of her tone, the way she tried to act like everything was normal, made me want to scream. But I couldn't do that. Not here. Not in front of Lily. "Change of plans," I said flatly, my voice tight. "She wanted to come here instead." "Ah," Emily murmured, glancing down at Lily. "Did you have fun, sweetie?" Lily nodded eagerly, oblivious to the tension simmering between us. "Yeah, Daddy took me on the swings and the slide, and I made some new friends." "That's wonderful," Emily said softly, her smile faltering as she looked back up at me. "Matt, can we?" "Not now." I cut her off, my tone sharper than I intended. Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw the flash of hurt there. But I didn't care. Couldn't. Because if I let myself feel anything other than anger right now, I'd break. "We need to go," I said shortly, turning away before she could respond. "Come on, Lily." And without another word, I led our daughter to the car, my heart aching, my mind a tangled mess of confusion and betrayal. As I drove home, Emily following in her own car, I couldn't shake the image of her kissing that man. It was burned into my memory, a searing brand of betrayal I couldn't erase. What the hell was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to confront her? What would I even say? I didn't have any answers. But one thing was painfully clear. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, was hiding something. And I needed to find out what it was. The drive home was suffocating. Lily chattered away in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the turmoil boiling inside me. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Emily's car trail behind us. Every time I saw the outline of her face through the windshield, the fury inside me grew hotter, more volatile. My knuckles tightened on the steering wheel until they turned white. How could she do this? How long had she been lying to me? By the time we pulled into our driveway, I was barely holding myself together. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, breathing hard, trying to keep my emotions under control. I couldn't explode in front of Lily, not until I had answers. "Daddy!" Lily's small voice broke through the haze of rage. She leaned forward between the seats, her big blue eyes worried. "Are you mad at Mommy?" Her innocent question sent a jolt through me. "No, sweetie, I'm not mad. It was a lie, but what else could I say?" I forced a smile, though it probably looked more like a grimace. "Why don't you head inside and get cleaned up for dinner?" She hesitated, glancing between me and Emily, who was climbing out of her car, her expression tense. "Okay," she said softly, unbuckling her seatbelt and sliding out of the back seat. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, kiddo. I watched her run up the steps and disappear into the house, the door swinging shut behind her. Only then did I turn to face Emily. She was standing a few feet away, wringing her hands nervously. The sight of her, the same woman I'd spent the last decade with, the mother of my child, made my chest ache. But the anger was still there, bubbling just below the surface, threatening to boil over. We need to talk, I said quietly, my voice cold. Matt, please, she started, taking a step closer. I don't know what you think you saw, but don't lie to me. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't help it. Not after what I'd seen. I saw you, Emily. I saw you. With that guy. She paled, her eyes widening in shock. You what? No, it's not what it looked like, I swear. Not what it looked like? I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and grating. So you're going to tell me I didn't just see my wife making out with some stranger in the park? Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. Matt, please let me explain. It's not. Who is he? I cut her off, taking a step closer. I could feel myself trembling, a dangerous edge to my voice. Who the hell is he, Emily? How long has this been going on? She shook her head frantically, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's not what you think. He's just a... Don't lie to me. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. I deserve the truth. After everything we've been through, after everything we've built together, I deserve that much. She flinched, staring at me with a mixture of guilt and desperation. For a long, painful moment, she just stood there, her lips trembling, as if trying to find the right words. And then, finally, she sagged, her shoulders slumping in defeat. His name is Nick, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He's a colleague. We met a few months ago at that conference in Chicago. A colleague. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So it was someone from work. The same work she'd been so busy with lately. The same work that kept her out late, that made her cancel plans, that had slowly driven a wedge between us. Why? I demanded, my voice raw. Why, Emily? What did I do wrong? What's so wrong with our life that you felt the need to do this? She shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. No, Matt, it's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's me. I don't know. I felt trapped. Trapped? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Trapped? What are you talking about? I don't know, she cried, covering her face with her hands. I don't know, okay? It just happened. I was stressed and Nick was there and he made me feel seen. Like I mattered. Like she mattered. I stared at her, a cold, hollow feeling spreading through my chest. What the hell did that even mean? Hadn't I always been there for her? Hadn't I always supported her? I thought we were happy. I thought we had a good life. Was that all a lie? So what now? I asked quietly, my voice tight. What are you going to do? Leave me? Leave Lily? Run off with this guy? No. She looked horrified. God, no, Matt, I would never. Then what? I demanded, my voice rising despite myself. What do you want from me, Emily? Because I can't just pretend this didn't happen. I can't just go back to the way things were. I don't want to leave you, she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. I love you, Matt. I love us. I made a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. And I wish I could take it back. But I can't. My chest tightened painfully. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, she whispered brokenly. I know, and I'm so sorry. But please, Matt, please don't give up on us. Don't throw everything away because of one mistake. One mistake. The words rang in my ears, echoing over and over again. One mistake that had shattered everything I thought I knew. One mistake that had turned my life upside down, that had left me questioning everything. I stared at her, my heart aching, my mind reeling. part of me wanted to scream at her, to lash out, to make her feel just a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted on me. But another part of me, an exhausted, broken part, just felt empty, numb. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, my voice shaking. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. Her face crumpled, and she took a step closer, reaching out as if to touch me. Please, Matt, please. Don't. I took a step back, my hands clenched at my sides. Just don't. I need some time. I need to think. Matt, please. But I couldn't listen anymore. I turned away from her, my chest heaving, and walked into the house, leaving her standing there on the driveway, sobbing quietly. Upstairs, I found Lily sitting in her room, playing with her dolls. She looked up at me and smiled, completely unaware of the storm raging between her parents. Daddy, can we have pizza for dinner? I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack. Sure, sweetie, I said softly. We can have whatever you want. Because right now, I'd do anything to see her smile, to hold onto this tiny piece of normalcy, even as everything else was falling apart. The next few days were a blur of confusion, anger, and gut-wrenching sadness. Emily and I barely spoke. When we did, it was strained, awkward, and only about necessary things: bills, work schedules, Lily's school. Each conversation felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong word threatening to send everything crashing down. I tried to be as normal as possible for Lily's sake. I helped her with her homework, took her to her soccer practice, and read her bedtime stories as if nothing was wrong. But even though she was just a kid, she sensed something was off. She started asking questions. Innocent, painful questions like, why isn't Mommy having dinner with us? Or, why are you sleeping on the couch, Daddy? Each time, I forced a smile and told her not to worry, but I knew it wouldn't last. Kids are perceptive. It was only a matter of time before she realized just how broken things really were. Emily, for her part, seemed to be on eggshells around me. She tried to initiate conversations, to talk about what had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was her with him, Nick, whoever the hell he was. It was like a splinter lodged deep in my brain, a constant, festering reminder of her betrayal. But there were practical things to consider, too. What was I supposed to do now? Was divorce the only option? Could I even contemplate uprooting our lives, tearing our family apart, just because of a mistake? And what about Lily? She adored her mother. How could I explain this to her? Late one evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Emily cornered me in the living room. I'd been camping out there since that horrible day, refusing to sleep in our bed. I couldn't bring myself to lie next to her, to pretend everything was okay. But I was exhausted, physically, emotionally. I'd barely been sleeping, and my mind was spinning in endless circles. Matt, we can't keep going like this, she said softly, standing in the doorway. I didn't respond, just kept my eyes on the muted television screen, even though I had no idea what was playing. We need to talk. About what? I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. What's left to talk about? Everything, she pleaded, stepping closer. I know I hurt you. I know you don't trust me right now. But we can't just pretend this isn't happening. Pretend. I finally looked up, feeling a fresh surge of anger. I'm not pretending anything, Emily. You're the one who lied. You're the one who... I stopped myself, my throat tightening. I couldn't even say it out loud without wanting to scream. She flinched but didn't back down. I'm sorry, Matt. I can't say it enough. I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose our family. I don't want to lose you. Then why did you do it? The question burst out of me before I could stop it. If you didn't want to lose me, why did you do it? Was I not enough for you? It's not about that, she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. It's not about you at all. Then what? I demanded, standing up so abruptly that she took a step back. Tell me, Emily. Make me understand. Because right now I can't. I can't see how this isn't about me or us or everything we've built together. She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking lost, desperate. I don't know, she admitted finally, her voice breaking. I was lonely. I felt like we were drifting apart. And then Nick, he was just there. He paid attention to me. He made me feel wanted. Wanted. I laughed bitterly. What the hell is that supposed to mean? You didn't feel wanted here, in your own home, with your husband and daughter. Not like that, she said softly, her eyes filling with tears. Not in the same way. I know it sounds selfish. I know it's wrong. But I felt so invisible, Matt. I felt like I was losing myself. Losing yourself? I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. So you thought having an affair would fix that? No, she choked on a sob, covering her face with her hands. I don't know what I thought. I wasn't thinking at all. I just wanted to feel something. Her words hung in the air, sharp and jagged. I stared at her, my chest heaving, trying to process everything she was saying. I wanted to believe her, to understand. But it didn't make sense. None of it made sense. So what now? I asked hoarsely. You felt something. Now what happens to us? I want to fix this, she whispered, looking up at me with those tear-filled eyes that used to make my heart ache with love. Now they just made me feel hollow. I want to make things right. Please, Matt, give me a chance. I'm willing to do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Just, please. I turned away, staring at the darkened window. A chance? Could I even consider that? Was there a way to move past this? Or was it too late? For a long time, I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my mind racing, my heart aching. Finally, I took a deep breath and turned back to face her. I don't know, Emily, I said quietly. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I want to. She gasped softly, her face crumpling. Please, Matt. But I won't make any decisions right now, I continued, holding up a hand. For Lily's sake, I'll think about it. I'll consider counseling. But don't expect me to just forget this. Don't expect everything to go back to normal. I won't, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I won't, I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. I nodded slowly, feeling utterly drained. I'm going to bed. But in the guest room, I added sharply, cutting her off. Good night, Emily. She didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, watching as I turned and walked out of the living room, leaving her alone in the darkness. I could still hear her soft, broken sobs echoing down the hallway as I climbed the stairs, my heart heavy with pain and uncertainty. In the guest room, I lay down on the unfamiliar bed and stared up at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Could we fix this? Did I even want to try? Or was it time to let go, to accept that the life I thought we had was over? I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But one thing was certain, things would never be the same. The next few weeks were some of the most confusing and emotionally draining of my life. I agreed to go to counseling, partly because I didn't know what else to do and partly because I wanted to at least say I tried, for Lily's sake if nothing else. But even as I walked into the therapist's office for that first session, my chest felt tight with a mixture of anger and resentment. Why should I be the one sitting here trying to fix something she broke? The therapist was a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Patel. She had a calm, non-judgmental presence that immediately made me feel more at ease, even if I didn't want to be. Emily and I sat across from each other on a small couch, the space between us feeling like an insurmountable chasm. Dr. Patel started with simple questions: how long we'd been married, what brought us here today. But when she asked us to talk about how we were feeling, I went silent. Emily, though, was ready to spill her heart out. I feel so ashamed, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know what I did was wrong, and I hurt Matt more than I can put into words. I want to understand why I did it, why I was willing to risk everything for someone who meant nothing. Her words stung, like salt in an open wound. She sounded so remorseful, so desperate to figure things out, and maybe that was part of what made it hurt even more, because if she couldn't explain why she did it, then what was to stop it from happening again? Dr. Patel turned to me gently. Matt, how do you feel about what Emily just said? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet Emily's gaze. Honestly, I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. I look at her, and all I see is betrayal. Emily's face crumpled, and she looked away, blinking back tears. But I didn't apologize. Couldn't. I was here, wasn't I? Trying. Wasn't that enough? Trust is difficult to rebuild after something like this, Dr. Patel said softly. But it's not impossible. It's going to take time and commitment from both of you. And honesty. A lot of honesty. Honesty. The word felt heavy, almost laughable, given what we were dealing with. But I nodded stiffly, agreeing to the bare minimum. I'm here, aren't I? I said flatly. I'm trying. Why? Dr. Patel asked, catching me off guard. I blinked at her, confused. What do you mean? Why are you trying, Matt? She repeated. What made you decide to come to counseling instead of walking away? I hesitated, glancing at Emily, who was staring at me with wide, hopeful eyes. I took a deep breath, considering my answer. There was the obvious reason, Lily, but was that really it? Or was there more? Because, I don't know, I said finally, feeling a knot form in my throat. Because I remember what it was like before all of this. I remember how happy we were, and I guess part of me still wants that. Emily made a soft, choked sound, covering her mouth with her hands. Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully, her gaze gentle. That's a good place to start, she said quietly. Remembering what you loved about each other. But to rebuild, we need to understand what went wrong. Emily, you mentioned feeling lonely, disconnected. Can you elaborate on that? Emily swallowed, looking down at her lap. It's not that Matt wasn't good to me. He's always been a good husband, a good father. But somewhere along the way, I just started to feel invisible. We got so caught up in work, in parenting, in life that it felt like we were just existing. Like we weren't really partners anymore. I clenched my jaw, biting back a retort. It felt like a cop-out, an excuse to justify what she did. But I stayed silent, listening as she continued. And then Nick came along, she murmured. He was just someone from work at first. We talked, had lunch together sometimes. Felt innocent. But then, it started to feel like he saw me in a way that Matt didn't anymore. Like he actually noticed me. My hands tightened into fists. Couldn't help it. Even after all these weeks, the mention of his name still sent a rush of fury through me. So what? I snapped. That makes it okay? Because I was busy with work? Because I was trying to support our family? No, of course not, she cried, shaking her head frantically. It wasn't your fault, Matt. It was mine. I should have talked to you. I should have told you how I was feeling. But instead, I did the worst possible thing. And I'm sorry. Her voice cracked, and I could see the genuine regret in her eyes. But it didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that she'd chosen to betray me, instead of coming to me. Dr. Patel let the silence linger for a moment, then turned back to me. Matt, what are you feeling right now? I don't know, I muttered, shaking my head. Angry, hurt, confused. Like I don't even know who she is anymore. Emily flinched, and I almost felt bad. Almost. But I couldn't take it back. It was the truth. And yet, you're still here, Dr. Patel pointed out gently. You still care, even if it's buried under all that pain. Did I? Maybe. I didn't know. But the idea of giving up on everything we'd built, on the life we'd created, made my chest ache. So I just nodded, not trusting myself to say more. The session ended soon after, with Dr. Patel encouraging us to keep talking, to try to communicate honestly, even if it hurt. We agreed to come back next week, though I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Every time I talked about it, every time I relived what happened, it felt like tearing open a wound that was already festering. But we kept going. Week after week, session after session. Slowly, painfully, we started to unpack everything. Years of resentment, of unmet needs, of things unsaid. I learned things about Emily I hadn't known, things I should have known, but didn't. And she learned about my own struggles, the pressure I felt to be the provider, to be perfect, to keep everything together, even when I was falling apart inside. It was brutal, excruciating even, but it was also necessary. Each session felt like shedding a layer of scar tissue, exposing raw, vulnerable skin underneath. And with every layer, I started to see Emily differently. Not just as the woman who betrayed me, but as a flawed, hurting person. But was that enough to save us? Was understanding her pain enough to make me forget mine? I didn't know. Not yet. The counseling sessions became a regular part of our week. It was strange, this routine of baring our souls in front of a stranger, dissecting our marriage like it was some kind of broken machine. I went through the motions because, well, I'd already committed to trying. For Lily's sake, and maybe even for my own, I needed to see it through. But every time I saw Emily across from me, saw her breaking down in tears or struggling to find the words to explain herself, I couldn't help wondering, was this all just wasted effort? Could we ever really get back what we'd lost? One day, Dr. Patel asked a question that shook me to my core. Matt, have you ever considered what forgiveness might look like for you? I blinked at her, caught off guard. Forgiveness? The word felt foreign, almost laughable. Forgiveness wasn't even on my radar. I was still stuck in a cycle of anger, sadness, and confusion. The idea of letting go of any of that seemed impossible. I don't know, I admitted slowly. I'm not even sure I want to forgive her. Emily's face crumpled, but I pressed on. I mean, what she did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate, calculated. She knew it would hurt me, and she did it anyway. How do you forgive something like that? Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. That's a valid question. But forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about finding a way to free yourself from the hold that pain has on you. It's for you, not for Emily. I frowned, shifting uncomfortably. So, you're saying I should just, what? Let it go? No, not let it go, she said gently. But maybe think about what it would mean to release some of that anger. To not carry it with you every single day. Because right now it's consuming you, and that's not sustainable. Her words haunted me for days after that session. Was my anger really consuming me? Was I letting what Emily did take over my life? I couldn't deny that every time I saw her, every time I thought about that day in the park, it was like a fresh wave of pain and bitterness washed over me. But wasn't that normal? Isn't that what you feel when you've been betrayed? Then one afternoon, something happened that shifted my perspective in a way I never expected. I was picking Lily up from daycare, as I did most afternoons. She came running up to me, her little backpack bouncing on her shoulders, a huge grin on her face. Daddy, Daddy, look what I made, she cried, waving a piece of paper covered in colorful scribbles. I crouched down, smiling despite myself. Wow, that's beautiful, sweetheart. What is it? It's a picture of our family, she announced proudly, holding it up for me to see. There, in bright crayon colors, were 3 stick figures, me, Emily, and Lily, standing under a big sun with a huge smiley face. We're all happy, she said brightly. And look, Mommy and Daddy are holding hands. I froze, staring at the drawing. It was such a simple, innocent depiction of what a family should be, happy, united, together. But the reality was so far from that. My first instinct was to feel sad, to think about how far we were from that image. But then I looked at Lily's face, at her beaming smile, and something inside me shifted. She still saw us that way. Despite everything, she still thought of us as a happy family. And maybe that meant there was still something worth saving. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I found myself sitting across from Emily at the kitchen table. We hadn't really spoken much outside of therapy sessions. There was still too much tension, too much unspoken pain between us. But for some reason, tonight felt different. Lily drew a picture of us today, I said quietly, breaking the silence. Emily looked up, surprised. Yeah? What did she draw? I hesitated, then slid the drawing across the table. Emily's eyes widened as she took it in, her lips parting slightly. She still sees us as a family, I murmured. Even after everything that's happened, She still thinks we're happy. Emily swallowed hard, her gaze lingering on the drawing. She's just a little girl, she whispered. She doesn't know. No, she doesn't, I agreed softly. But maybe that's why we need to figure this out. For her. Emily looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Matt, I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back. I wish I'd never. Her voice broke, and she shook her head, unable to continue. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar swell of anger and pain rise up inside me. But then I looked at the drawing again, at the way Lily had carefully placed us side by side, holding hands. And suddenly I was just tired of carrying this weight, tired of feeling like I was drowning in bitterness and hurt. Maybe we should try, I said slowly. For real this time. Not just for Lily, but for us. Emily's eyes widened, and she stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You mean, you want to give us another chance? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. I don't know if I can ever forgive you completely, I admitted, but I'm willing to try, because I don't want Lily to grow up thinking this is normal. I don't want her to lose her family. Emily nodded frantically, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll do whatever it takes, Matt. Promise. I'll prove to you that I'm committed. I'll go to therapy. Stop, I interrupted gently. Let's just take it one day at a time. We can't fix this overnight. But if we both try, maybe there's still hope. Hope. It was a fragile, tentative word, but it felt like the first real step I'd taken in a long time. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. One day at a time, she whispered. Okay. It wasn't a grand declaration of forgiveness. It wasn't a promise that everything would go back to the way it was. But it was something. A small, flickering spark in the darkness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we might be able to find our way back to each other. Taking things one day at a time was easier said than done. We had agreed to give it a shot for Lily's sake, but every moment around Emily felt fraught with tension. It was like walking on glass barefoot. One wrong step and everything could shatter. Still, I tried to push back the bitterness, the hurt, and the distrust that seemed to surface whenever we were together. Some days were easier than others. Small moments, like sitting down to watch TV with Lily or sharing breakfast in the morning without snapping at each other, felt like tiny victories. But then there were the nights. Those long, quiet nights when I lay awake beside Emily, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of what I'd seen in the park. Her lips on another man's. The way she'd looked at him, smiled at him, the same way she used to smile at me. During one of our counseling sessions, Dr. Patel suggested a practical approach. Have you considered setting aside time for just the two of you? Without Lily, without distractions. Just to reconnect. The suggestion seemed almost laughable. How was I supposed to reconnect with someone I felt like I barely knew anymore? But Emily, ever hopeful, latched onto the idea. We could try, she said softly. Maybe go out for dinner sometime? Or take a walk like we used to. I almost scoffed at the suggestion. The idea of pretending everything was normal felt wrong. But then I remembered Lily's drawing, her happy family. If I didn't try, if I didn't at least give this a chance, what kind of father would I be? So, reluctantly, I agreed. We started small. Dinner at a quiet restaurant, where we sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence, forcing ourselves to make awkward conversation. It was strange, surreal even, trying to talk about mundane things like work and news when there was an unspoken chasm of pain between us. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. The silences grew less oppressive. We started talking more about real things, not just surface-level small talk. Emily shared how she felt after the affair, the guilt and self-loathing that had eaten away at her every day, how she'd struggled to understand why she'd done what she did, how she felt like she'd destroyed everything we had. And me? I started to open up too. Not all at once, not completely, but I began to share my own pain, my own doubts and fears. The fact that I wasn't just angry, I was scared. Scared that I would never be able to look at her without seeing betrayal. Scared that our marriage was too broken to fix. Scared that I'd end up losing the woman I'd loved for so long. Do you think you'll ever be able to trust me again? Emily asked one night as we sat in the backyard, sipping cups of tea under the stars. I hesitated, turning the question over in my mind. I don't know, I admitted quietly. Trust? It's like glass, you know? Once it's broken, even if you glue it back together, you can still see the cracks. It's never the same. Her shoulders slumped, but she nodded. I understand. I want to prove to you that I can be better. That I can be the wife you deserve. I know, I said softly, but it's not something you can fix overnight. And honestly, I think I need to figure out what I deserve too. The conversation left us both raw and emotional, but strangely, it felt like progress. For the first time, we weren't just dancing around the pain. We were facing it head-on. One afternoon, a few months later, we decided to take Lily to the park. It was the same park where I'd discovered Emily's affair. I hadn't been back since that day. The thought of returning had always filled me with dread. But Emily suggested it, and for some reason I agreed. Are you sure this is a good idea? I asked as we parked the car and walked toward the entrance. Emily looked nervous but determined. I think we need to confront it. Together. So we did. Hand in hand, we walked through the park, watching Lily skip ahead of us, giggling as she chased butterflies. The playground, the benches, even the trees, all of it brought back painful memories, but it also brought something else. A sense of closure, maybe, or at least the beginning of one. We reached the spot where I'd stood that day, where I'd seen Emily with him. I stopped, staring at the bench as if it were some kind of haunted landmark. Matt! Emily's voice was soft, trembling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She'd apologized countless times before, but this time, standing in that spot, it felt different, more real somehow. I know, I whispered, and I'm trying, Emily. I'm really trying to move past it, but it's hard. I don't expect you to forget, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. But I want you to know that I'm committed to this, to us. I love you, Matt. I never stopped loving you. Even when her voice broke, and she shook her head. I was stupid, selfish, and I threw away everything good in my life. But I want to rebuild it, if you'll let me. The sincerity in her eyes, the raw emotion, it took me by surprise. Maybe, deep down, a part of me had been waiting to hear those words. Or maybe it was just that, standing in the very place where everything had fallen apart, I realized something. I still loved her too. Despite everything, despite the pain and the betrayal, a small, stubborn part of me still held on to that love. And maybe that was enough to build on. I love you too, I murmured, almost afraid to say it out loud. But it's not enough, Emily. Can't just be words. We need to rebuild piece by piece. And that's going to take time. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'll wait, as long as it takes. We stood there for a long moment, holding each other, the past swirling around us like a ghost. But for the first time, I felt something other than pain. I felt hope. It was small, fragile, and tentative. But it was there. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. The days that followed were filled with cautious optimism. We still had a long road ahead, and I wasn't naive enough to think everything was magically fixed. But something was different now. There was a mutual understanding, a willingness to put in the work, no matter how painful or uncomfortable it might be. We began focusing on small changes, being more present with each other, communicating openly, and addressing issues as they came up instead of letting them fester. It wasn't easy. In fact, some days were downright brutal. There were arguments, breakdowns, and moments where I wanted to walk away, to give up and save myself from more heartache. But then there were glimpses of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, and it made me pause. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Messy, unpredictable, but not impossible. One evening, Emily suggested something that caught me off guard. A weekend away, just the two of us. Are you sure? I asked, the skepticism clear in my voice. We're finally starting to find a rhythm. What if it just makes things worse? She shook her head. Or what if it helps us reconnect? What if it reminds us why we fell in love in the first place? The idea felt risky, like tempting fate, but after talking it over in one of our counseling sessions, I agreed. We made arrangements for Lily to stay with Emily's parents, and a few weeks later, we found ourselves driving out to a secluded cabin near the mountains. The place was beautiful, quiet, surrounded by towering trees and with a view of a serene lake. But as we unpacked and settled in, an awkward tension lingered between us, like we were two strangers trying to figure out what to say to each other. So, I began hesitantly as we stood on the porch, looking out at the sun setting over the water. Why did you choose this place? Emily glanced at me, a faint smile tugging at her lips. It reminded me of that camping trip we took when we first started dating. Remember? I blinked, caught off guard by the memory. The one where it rained the whole weekend, and we ended up huddling under a leaky tent? She laughed softly. Yeah, and we still had a great time, even though everything went wrong. I hadn't thought about that trip in years, but now that she'd mentioned it, the memory came flooding back. The way we'd spent the nights laughing, talking about our dreams, and how we'd shared that tiny sleeping bag, trying to stay warm. That was a good weekend, I admitted quietly. We didn't have much, but we were happy. Emily's expression softened. We were, and I want to get back to that place, Matt. I know we can't undo what's happened, but I want to find a way to be happy again. Together. Her words hung in the air between us, filled with a sincerity that made my chest tighten. It was the first time in a long while that I felt something other than bitterness and anger when I looked at her. Let's see how this weekend goes, I said finally, offering her a tentative smile. No expectations. Just us. The next 2 days were strange but enlightening. Without the distractions of daily life, without the need to maintain a facade for Lily, we had nothing to hide behind. We hiked through the woods, cooked meals together, and spent long hours sitting by the lake, talking about everything and nothing. There were moments of awkwardness, but there were also moments of genuine connection, little sparks of the bond we used to have. On our second night, as we sat by the fire, Emily reached over and took my hand, hesitating for a second before speaking. Can I tell you something? She asked softly. Sure, I replied, wary but curious. She took a deep breath. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in a way that's probably impossible to fully repair. But I'm not giving up. I'm not going to stop trying to prove to you that I can be the wife you need, even if it takes the rest of my life. Her words struck a chord deep within me. I could see the determination in her eyes, the way her grip tightened around my hand, as if she was afraid I'd pull away. And for a moment, I felt something shift. It wasn't forgiveness, maybe I'd never fully forgive her, but it was something close, an acceptance of our brokenness and a willingness to see where this path might lead. I can't promise anything, I said quietly, squeezing her hand in return, but I'm willing to see if we can find our way back. The look on her face was one of pure relief, and as we sat there watching the flames dance in the fire pit, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this weekend was exactly what we needed. A chance to step away from the pain, to remember the love we used to share, and to decide if it was worth fighting for. When we returned home, something felt different. Lighter, almost. There was still a long way to go, and I knew there would be setbacks, but for the first time in months, I felt like we were truly on the same page. We continued our counseling sessions, and slowly but surely, the dynamic between us began to shift. I found myself letting go of some of the anger I'd been clinging to, opening up to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. There were days when the hurt resurfaced, sharp and painful, and nights when the doubts kept me awake, wondering if I was a fool for even trying. But then there were also good days. Days when we laughed together, shared quiet moments, and felt like a team again. One afternoon, about a year after the affair had come to light, I found myself standing in the kitchen, watching Emily as she helped Lily with a school project. She looked up, caught my gaze and smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile that I hadn't seen in what felt like forever. And in that moment, I realized something. We weren't just trying to survive anymore. We were rebuilding. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. But it was real, and that was enough. For now, at least. As the months turned into years, our lives gradually found a new sense of stability. It wasn't a fairy tale ending by any means. There were still moments of doubt, occasional arguments that touched on old wounds, and times when I questioned whether I'd ever truly moved on from what Emily had done. But we were no longer defined by the affair. We had carved out a new chapter for ourselves, and it was one that we were writing together, day by day. Our daughter, Lily, seemed to thrive as well. She was older now, more perceptive, and I sometimes wondered how much she understood about what had transpired between her parents. We hadn't gone into the details with her, but children are far more intuitive than adults often give them credit for. There were moments when she would look at us, eyes shifting back and forth, as if studying the dynamics between her mother and me, and I could see the concern in her gaze. But with time, those looks became less frequent, replaced by the easy smile of a child who felt safe and loved. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, our small family sharing a simple meal and talking about the mundane details of our day, I realized just how far we'd come. There was laughter in our house again, genuine joy that had been missing for so long. I looked over at Emily, catching her eye, and for a split second, it was as if the world faded away, leaving just the two of us. "Hey," she said softly, smiling in that shy way she used to when we first started dating. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I murmured, unable to keep the smile off my own face. I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we didn't give up." Emily's eyes softened, and she reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. The simple gesture felt like a promise, a vow that she was still committed, still fighting to make this work. And in that moment, I felt something that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. As time went on, the weight of the past began to lift, bit by bit. We started to plan for the future again, talking about our goals and dreams in a way we hadn't dared to since the affair came to light. It was strange, almost surreal, to think that we'd come so close to losing everything, yet here we were, still standing. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were still scars, invisible but ever present, reminding us of the damage that had been done. Every now and then, something would trigger a memory, the scent of a particular cologne, a certain phrase, a look that lingered just a second too long, and I'd feel the familiar pang of betrayal, sharp and painful. But those moments no longer defined us. They were just echoes of a past we were slowly learning to put behind us. One day, about 3 years after the affair, we decided to take a family vacation. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a week at a lakeside cabin, similar to the one we'd visited during our weekend away. It felt symbolic somehow, like a way of acknowledging how far we'd come since that pivotal moment. The days were filled with laughter and adventure. We went fishing, explored hiking trails, and spent lazy afternoons swimming in the cool, clear water. Lily was ecstatic, her energy and excitement contagious. Watching her play, carefree and happy, I felt a surge of gratitude for the life we'd managed to rebuild. On our last evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the lake, Emily and I found ourselves sitting on the porch, side by side. Lily was fast asleep inside, worn out from a day of adventure, leaving us with a rare moment of solitude. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Emily murmured, her gaze fixed on the water. "Yeah," I agreed, glancing at her. "It is." She turned to look at me then, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking, I want to talk about something I haven't really said out loud before." I felt a flicker of apprehension. After everything we'd been through, moments like this still made me nervous. But I nodded, gesturing for her to continue. I want you to know how much I regret what I did. Not just because it hurt you, but because it nearly destroyed us. And I don't think I ever really understood what I was risking until I almost lost it all." Her voice was quiet, tinged with a sadness that tugged at something deep inside me. I swallowed, trying to find the right words. "Emily, No, let me finish, she interrupted gently, squeezing my hand. I know you've forgiven me, at least as much as you can. But I need you to hear this. I'm sorry, truly deeply sorry. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure I never take you or our family for granted again. I stared at her, emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of love, pain, and something else, something lighter. Relief, maybe, or perhaps acceptance. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that she was here, that we were here, and that despite everything we'd found a way back to each other. I believe you, I said quietly, reaching up to cup her cheek. And I'm glad we didn't give up, because I still love you, Emily, even after everything. Tears welled in her eyes, and she leaned in, resting her forehead against mine. I love you too, Matt, more than I can ever put into words. We sat like that for a long time, wrapped in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. The story of our relationship wasn't a fairy tale. There were no easy fixes or perfect endings, but it was ours, messy, imperfect, and real. And maybe that was enough. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above us, I realized that we were no longer defined by the mistakes of the past. We were simply a man and a woman, two flawed people trying to build something beautiful out of the wreckage. And that, I decided, was a story worth holding on to. Bye-bye.